Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Fisher, coming to you from Studio B. On this edition of AZ Illustrated Science, we focus on health, particularly Native American health and what it can teach us about overall healing and wellness for everyone. Also, the author of the book, Red Medicine, Traditional Indigenous Rites of Birthing and Healing, joins us to talk about symbols as medicine. And we discuss the role of Native Americans in the U.S. military. But first, here's a look at today's top stories.
A committee in the Arizona House of Representatives is taking the first steps to deal with the aftermath of the Yarnell Hill fire. The committee convened today at the request of House Speaker Andy Tobin. The committee is drafting a series of bills that would help fund the rebuilding efforts in Yarnell, as well as give full survivor benefits to the relatives of the 19 firefighters killed battling the blaze. The Tohono O'odham's proposed casino near Phoenix has run into a congressional roadblock. House Resolution 1410 prohibits any more casinos to be built in the Phoenix metro area. Congressman Raul Grijalva argued against the proposal on the floor of the U.S. House. The bill is co-sponsored by Southern Arizona Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, as well as a bipartisan handful of Phoenix area members of the House. The Tohono O'odham have won a series of court battles to get permission to build the casino. Senator John McCain is demanding answers from the Border Patrol after an investigation revealed the agency paid nearly $13 million for 21 housing units in Ajo. The cost for the trailers and single-family homes for Border Patrol agents averaged $605,000. The average home cost in Ajo is about $100,000. In his letter to Border Patrol officials, McCain called the cost staggering and said the federal government needs to make smart financial decisions. And several organizations are starting a public education campaign to build support towards a law allowing gay marriage in Arizona. Why Marriage Matters Arizona is a coalition of civil rights organizations. Their ultimate goal is to get a citizen initiative on the ballot in 2016. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Despite a painful history, many Native American cultures have survived and even thrived. Now researchers are exploring the roots of their resilience. Gisela Tellis has more.
In the cafeteria of the New Direction Center, a Tucson behavioral health and substance abuse treatment facility, Tommy Begay is channeling history. He's calling on the Navajo prayers and practices he learned from his great-grandmother to help others heal.
She taught me about this harmonious connection I could have with the universe, how peace could affect me.
Like the people who join his talking circle, Begay once battled addiction and trauma himself. Now, as a research associate in the University of Arizona Department of Psychiatry, he's working to understand the roots of the suffering he has seen in many Native communities.
It wasn't really until I left the Navajo Indian Reservation that I realized that there was a reason why my childhood experiences were what they were, and that basically something had happened. And basically, as I've come to realize or come to learn, there was an intergenerational cultural component, and that intergenerational cultural component led to some very dysfunctional behaviors of substance abuse and violence.
Begay believes that historical trauma, the legacy of forced assimilation, displacement, and other painful events, has created a higher risk for intergenerational abuse and chronic disease in Native American communities. That higher risk comes in part from the changes that our experiences can make in our bodies, and even in our DNA.
For every behavior, for every activity, there is a physiological consequence, the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Take childhood trauma, for example. Studies have shown that adults who had a difficult childhood have higher levels of nuclear factor kappa B, a kind of signal that tells your DNA what to do in response to stress and inflammation. When children experience repeated trauma, it wreaks havoc on this signaling system well into adulthood, with consequences for mental and physical health.
And that lends to a higher concentration of this transcription factor, nuclear factor kappa B, and that's what we see in adults that have had this adverse childhood experience. But because of this overstimulated stress response system, you're more likely to have because of inflammation, you're more likely to have a chronic disease at some point in the future.
But resilience, the ability to cope with hard times in positive ways, can also have a physiological impact, and it can grow from Native American cultural and spiritual traditions. New Directions and many other treatment centers across the country are finding that when they incorporate traditional practices, like talking circles and sweat lodges, people are less likely to drop out of treatment and more likely to enjoy better outcomes. According to Begay, scientists are still trying to figure out why.
There's almost been nothing done as far as research is concerned on the impact, the neurophysiological and physiological impact of Native American prayer, Native American ceremony.
Begay and his colleagues have found that meditation and other spiritual practices induce physiological changes that ease the stress response and help build resilience in the process. Begay plans to apply similar methodologies to learn how Native American ceremonies affect the body, to discover what he calls the biology of hope. At the UA Center for American Indian Resilience, researchers Kirsten Reinschmidt and Agnes Adekai are also studying how culture contributes to resilience. They're working with the Tucson Indian Center to gather stories about resilience from Navajo and Hopi elders.
That truck there and go through all the mud puddles, getting home finally, that's resilience to me. That's what I think about.
So we're asking the elders, what has gotten you through difficult times or hard times, or your family? And we're looking at this from both the individual as well as the community angle. So what are people doing as individuals, but also part of a specific culture? What are you doing being Navajo? What are you doing being a Hopi member? What can you draw from your culture that makes you strong?
Their work is revealing that traditional ways offer strategies for dealing with hard times, as well as a sense of belonging, two factors known to foster resilience.
What we found out, particularly among young people who are experiencing troubles in their life, a lot of them have said that they've lost their identity. They don't know who they are.
A lot of what we're finding is that people are, if they know where their roots come from, that what their roots are, it's a source of strength. So it's a source of pride and strength, and it's a foundation to tackle problems in a traditional way.
This is you. This represents you.
Begay, Reinschmidt, and Adekai hope that by better understanding the connection between culture and resilience, they can help Native communities to rediscover their own strengths, to tap into the wisdom of the past, to build a hopeful, healthy future.
Keep coming back. It works if you work it.
Oh, thank you guys. You're welcome. Thank you.
This summer, the University of Arizona's new Center for American Indian Resilience, or CARE, brought experts from many disciplines to Tucson to explore how Native American cultural practices and traditions contribute to health and wellness. Here to discuss what that conference revealed are CARE co-director Nikki Teufel-Schoen and research specialist Tara Chico. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi.
Nikki, first of all, I wanted to find out, what is the U of A Center for American Indian Resilience and what is its overall focus?
The center is actually a partnership between the U of A, Northern Arizona University, and Diné College. And it's a bit exploratory in trying to understand the concept of resilience in American Indian communities, how it's perceived, and then what lessons we can learn from perceptions of resilience.
And when we talk about American Indian resilience, what do we mean?
We mean the behaviors and practices and that provide people the strength and the skills to be successful. And success can be measured in terms of health outcomes or overall perception of well-being and just having a positive health outcome.
And Tara, why did you decide to hold this conference?
We decided to hold the conference because we thought that people were practicing resilience and didn't even really know they were practicing resilience, and we were trying to focus on what positive parts of the communities are using in their programs to have successful outcomes for American Indian people. So we're trying to take down the silos of different academics, cultural wisdom, and community, and bring us together to have a discussion on what resilience means to each of us from these different areas.
And Tara, what kind of ideas were developed? What were some of the takeaways from the meeting?
The biggest takeaway was a call to action. You know, we're there talking about what needs to be done, and everyone wants to move and stop talking about it and start doing it. So I think that was the biggest takeaway from the conference is what are our next steps and how are we going to move forward and use the information gained from all these perspectives in promoting healthier communities.
And how will those takeaways be used, in fact? Do you have plans for that?
We do. Do you want to?
Well, our first plan is we have at the College of Public Health an American Indian Indigenous Public Health Alliance, and we're going to partner with them in November and do follow-up for the conference and have follow-up events. One of our keynote speakers is going to talk about sovereignty and healthcare and what we're doing in that arena to promote resilience.
And how will these findings be beneficial not only for Native Americans, but also for, say, healthcare providers or even non-Native Americans?
I think what we're doing to date and what we're going to do with our follow-up activities is really to document stories of resilience. What are people identifying are important, whether it's individual family support or whether it's tribal sovereignty? What are models of practices that have contributed to resilience? And once we were able to document that, we really hope it will influence how programs are designed and implemented so that we're not focusing so much on a deficit model, but on a positive model where we can promote health through improved skills and behaviors that contribute to positive health outcomes.
So a more proactive stance, perhaps?
Right. I think American Indian health, focus on American Indian health has been very deficit oriented. We have been very focused on high rates of particular health outcomes. And the focus of this center is to look at models of best practices that have really contributed to positive health outcomes.
Okay. And in terms of studying things like resilience and success, how is this evidence judged, and what are researchers looking for as a result of this work?
I think what we're doing is documenting those stories and then trying to find dominant themes that would serve to help guide future programs, whether those programs are designed for American Indians or other underserved populations that deal with some of the same kind of struggles in terms of achieving positive health outcomes.
Okay, and we have about a minute left. I just want to find out that during the conference, UA Professor Manly Begay called for new research into the protective factors of Native cultures. How is CARE planning on answering this call to action?
I think we're going to spend time looking at what, now that since there's tribal sovereignty, and tribal sovereignty has taken a number of different paths, whether it's control of healthcare services, whether it's control of contract employment opportunities in their communities, and the idea of how can tribal sovereignty really be leveraged to improve health practices in communities. So we're really interested not only in the local influences on resilience, but also those large tribal sovereignty issues on resilience.
Well, Nikki and Tara, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The gunman who murdered 12 people at Washington's Navy Yard showed signs of mental illness and complained of hearing voices, but was still able to keep his security clearance.
Plus, the story of families whose lives have been washed away by devastating floods in Colorado.
When I actually saw the face of my house, my gut just went through my feet, and realizing that there was nothing salvageable, really. I don't even know how to describe it.
And we trekked north, far north, where melting Arctic ice has spurred a boom in shipping, but raised concerns about navigating uncharted waters.
I think the surface of Mars has been mapped better than our oceans have been.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff.
And I'm Gwen Eiffel. Those are just some of the stories we're covering on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Counselors are supposed to help Americans navigate the new health insurance exchanges, but Florida will ban those counselors from most state health offices.
Our citizens need to know that that information that they're giving up could compromise their safety and security.
I'm Steve Inskeep. Florida braces for Obamacare on the next morning edition from NPR News.
Allopathic medicine, sometimes called conventional or Western medicine, typically treats symptoms with drugs and is the kind of medicine with which you are probably most familiar. It is generally what you get when you are treated by your family doctor or fill a prescription at the local pharmacy. While it may not be obvious, allopathic medicine is based on certain ideas about the body, nature, and healing. And these ideas can be very different than those used in the healing systems of Native Americans. Joining us in the studio is Patrisia Gonzalez, an assistant professor in the University of Arizona Department of Mexican American Studies and author of the book Red Medicine: Traditional Indigenous Rites of Birthing and Healing. Patrisia, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
Patrisia, in your book, you attach a number of meanings to the word red. Please describe a few of them.
Well, in traditional healing systems, indigenous healing systems, red is a power. It can be a power because even a color can be alive and it can have a healing property. And when a particular color is placed within an altar or a place of offering, or whether it be a particular kind of seed that's red or a particular cloth that's red, it becomes part of the medicine in the ceremony to heal that person. And also we have many things that are in nature that's red and they're associated with being healing, such as blood being the color red being the color of blood and blood being the color of life, and also associated with the female power to give life.
Patrisia, you write about the body and particularly how the body is conceptualized. Explain that to me, if you will, and how those ideas about the body differ from what we see in conventional or Western medicine.
And well, you know, I think that now, because of alternative medicine, people are aware of things like auras and chakras, maybe these energetic centers. For indigenous people, the body has goes beyond its physical self, and so it has. Depending on the tradition that we're talking about, the body can actually, part of the body can be displaced at a particular place because of, let's say, a trauma. Part of the body can also leave during times of dreaming, and so, but without the person dying per se. And so so that kind of understanding of the body can help us understand what happens when people have trauma, for instance. But also, for many indigenous people, the concept of the body being connected to the earth. And one way that the body is connected to the earth in a very physical way is when, for instance, is when a child is born. If the umbilical cord is buried or is offered back to the earth, then literally a piece of yourself is in the earth. When your ancestors have been buried in the earth, then literally your relatives are in the earth. And when you understand that the earth is your mother, then literally the earth is your mother. And so that understanding of your relationship with nature becomes really a relationship of family. And so you have this very direct connection with nature.
And in your book, you discuss natural law. Could you explain about that a little bit, please?
Natural law are understandings that we have that have originated over time, as that when we were created as human beings and when we evolved as human beings, we came into accords. According to the elders, we came into these agreements and accords, and different peoples had these different ways of understanding how we would be in relationship with nature. But that came about through understanding how nature worked. And so the elders and our ancestors began to realize that there had to be a balance, and that in order to maintain balance, you might make an offering, or you might not take too much from a place. Or if you gather the plant, you didn't take the first plant you saw. You didn't, and you didn't take all of the plant, so that you would maintain a relationship with it. And so that is an example, an expression of natural law.
And Patrisia, what role does spirituality play in red medicine?
Well, spirituality is it's a word we use, and it's a kind of ambiguous word. It is a spiritual thing to have good relationships with your family. It's a spiritual, an herb you can take an herbal tea and it might relax you, but it can also affect your spirit. And so spirituality, in some ways we may think that you have to go someplace to say your prayers, and there are many ceremonies that are healing ceremonies that take place at particular kinds of places. But spirituality is also maintaining that balance within a family, within a society. Because if the society as a whole is sick, then the individual can be sick. And if the individual is sick, there's also imbalance in society. And so that's also an example of that reciprocal relationship. Part of the natural law is that you're always in interrelationship with everything else. And you can't look at restoring balance of one entity without looking at how it impacts the rest, including the environment.
And in your book, Patrisia, you talk about silent texts. Could you explain a little bit about that, please?
A lot of traditional medicine had to go underground because it was persecuted from the moment that the European invasion occurred, and as conversion happened over more than 500 years. People in Mexico, indigenous peoples had books, painted books. And so part of red medicine talks about the painting that was actually used in the color red, that we can look at the knowledge that was recorded to see why people continue to do these things, but yet they maintain them underground, they maintain them in families. So many of the healers and the traditional doctors had to go underground because they could be persecuted by the church or by state laws. In the United States, people were persecuted for doing ceremonies such as the ghost dance, and people could be persecuted and arrested for doing their traditions or doing the Sundance ceremony. So a lot of things were silenced in that sense, and they had to be kept secret. And many things are maintained secretly. So sometimes when we talk about the silent text, we're talking about the things that may have been preserved in oral tradition. And in some ways that's its strength, because it's not necessarily exposed to the internet, right, to this kind of general taking of knowledge without the cultural context from which it evolves.
Well, Patrisia, thank you very much for joining us today. Very much appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
Native Americans have long served in the United States military and continue to do so in large numbers. And many of these soldiers, upon returning home, do not get the benefits to which they are entitled. To tell us more about this, in a coming gathering to help Native American vets learn more about the benefits they have earned, are George W. Bearpaw, Acting Director of the Tucson Area Indian Health Service, and Pepe Mendoza with the Southern Arizona VA Healthcare System. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Pepe, how many Native Americans are serving in the U.S. military at this time?
Right at the present time, there's over 2,235,000 active duty reserve National Guard throughout the total active force, but out of those, over 31,000 are Native Americans or Alaskan Natives. Now, what's amazing about this is that only 4% of the Native Americans are in the total population of the United States, but little information is known that over 20% of those have been in the military services and active and reserve services as well.
And are they more prominent in one specific branch of the military than another?
It's been looked at and researched that most of the Indian Americans and the Alaskan Natives are in the highest services, usually accounted for the Marine Corps first and the Army second, as far as the numbers go, as far as enlisting in those services.
And gentlemen, how many of these soldiers enlist while they are actually living on the reservation? Are there any statistics for that?
I don't think there's any statistics as far as the Native Americans from the reservation. I do know that it was primarily most of them in World War II, World War I, and beyond that did come from the reservations to serve. But now there's a lot of our natives that are living in urban programs or urban areas, and they do serve as a group more than any other ethnic group as they enlist.
And when the Native American enlisted people return from their service, do they typically go back to the reservation, or are they living in cities and so forth?
Well, yes, they do. They go back to the reservations, and that's why the need for this outreach is to tell them about their benefits that they have earned. Because a lot of them traditionally go back to the reservation, except for here, and I'll let Pepe cover that.
What's really amazing here, Ellen, is that we have a joint venture that's just one of the few in the nation where we work together with the Indian Health Service, the Indian Cultural Center, our vet centers, and we get together as a joint venture to let the Native Americans know, American Indian veterans know, and their families know about the benefits they might have both in the Indian Health Service and also in the VA side of the house, or the Southern Arizona VA healthcare system. And we have representatives who are going to be there to let them know about those benefits they might not know about, together as a team. And that's what's really special about this gathering.
And are there a large percentage of these returning vets who are unaware, perhaps, or not taking advantage of these benefits that are due to them?
Again, yes, it is. There's primarily more Native vets do not really access the services, except for, like Pepe mentioned, here in Southern Arizona. We do try to do a lot of outreach. There's a coordinator that goes out to the reservations to really talk to them about benefits. But traditionally, yes, they do go back to the reservation. They access the Indian Health Service more than they do the VA. So they kind of get lost in the numbers.
And George, could you tell us a little bit about the 7th annual gathering of American Indian veterans that's going to be taking place September 22nd?
Yes, we're really excited about this year's event, simply because this is our 2nd year that we're going to have it at the conference center there at the Casino del Sol. It's an indoor facility, plenty of room. I think we've got, as of Friday, we had over 45 booths that's going to be set up, not only of what Pepe mentioned about the benefits, but also other benefits like the court system and other benefits that that the Native American really needs to know about in what they've earned as far as Native American veterans.
And what are some of the specific services and activities that will be offered to these vets at the event?
Well, I can tell you from the Southern Arizona VA healthcare side, we're going to have representatives there from the eligibility and enrollment side. So what this means in layman terms, if they bring their discharge paperwork, better known as a DD Form 214, they can enroll for health care there during the gathering. And we're also going to have the women's health veteran representatives, our OEF, OIF, OND, which is simply stated Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation New Dawn, representatives and advocates for counseling. We're also going to have our mental health care representatives. The vet center is going to be there. The Department of Economic Security that could be offering them job placements information. So it's going to be a potpourri, if you will, of information, not only the VA side, but also Indian Health Service, scholarship programs, things of that nature. And the beauty is there'll be a children's area. So the children will have activities while their parents are getting the information they need, and the children will be active in games and things of that sort on the side there.
And we will have more information on the event at our azpm.org website. Pepe and George, I want to thank you very, very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alan.
That's our show. To post a comment on any of these stories or to keep up with the latest news, go online to our website at azpm.org. I'm Alan Fisher. Thanks for watching.